She gave her jacket to a shivering man at the bus stop. Unaware he's a millionaire. He shockingly changed her life. After a 14-hour shift at the hospital, Nurse Emily Winters was exhausted. Not just tired, wrung out, like a sponge squeezed dry. Her blue scrubs, once crisp at sunrise, now clung to her like second skin, creased, damp at the hem, and faintly speckled with the invisible marks of a long day, antiseptic, coffee, sorrow. The knees were faded, the fabric around the pockets worn thin. Her hospital-issued parka barely kept the wind out as she stepped through the sliding ER doors into the biting midnight air. The wind knifed through the city streets, pulling at loose flyers on light poles and rattling empty coffee cups down the sidewalk. Snowflakes floated lazily under the pale orange glow of the street lamps, swirling like ashes from a dying fire. It was the kind of cold that sank deep into your bones and made even the bravest souls question their decisions. But Emily didn't flinch. This was routine. Her body moved from habit, her muscles on autopilot as she headed toward the bus stop at the corner of 8th and Fremont. She was thinking of the patient who died just 2 hours earlier. A man in his 50s, cardiac arrest, no family listed. She'd been the one to close his eyes. She always did it gently, as though he might feel it even in death. As she approached the bench by the stop, Emily slowed. A figure was hunched in the far corner, curled in on himself like a question mark. He wore a threadbare gray hoodie, its fabric soaked through with snow. His jeans were stiff with moisture. His shoes, if they could even be called that, were torn at the seams, exposing pale, almost blue skin beneath. His hands trembled violently, fingers balled into fists under his armpits for warmth. Emily stopped walking. The world around her faded. No car horns, no wind, no snow crunching under her shoes. Just him. Something about him. The way his shoulders trembled, the tilt of his head, the vacant stare aimed at nothing, cut straight through her fatigue. It was a look she'd seen countless times in hospital beds and emergency rooms. The look of someone giving up. Without hesitation, she stepped forward. Wordlessly, she unzipped her parka. It was standard hospital issue, navy blue, lined with fleece, embroidered with her name, E. Winters, RN. A gift from the department after 5 years of service. She didn't hesitate. She pulled it from her shoulders and leaned down. Here, she said softly, draping it over him. This'll help. The man blinked up at her, startled. His lips were chapped, cracked, barely able to form words. You don't have to. Emily knelt beside him, meeting his eyes. They were startlingly clear beneath the grime on his face, gray, flecked with something distant and unreadable. I couldn't just walk past you, she said. Her voice was calm, steady, the same one she used with trauma patients who were too afraid to scream. She reached into her backpack and pulled out her half-full thermos. Coffee, she offered. Then she added a granola bar. And something small. It's all I've got. He stared at her like she was a hallucination. Why? She gave a tired half-smile. Because you're freezing, and I'd want someone to do the same for me. She stood and glanced down the road. The bus's headlights were rounding the corner. Stay warm, okay? And just like that, she was gone, disappearing into the bright interior of the city bus. The man watched as the doors folded shut and the vehicle rumbled away. The jacket was still warm from her body. He clutched it tightly, the thermos pressed to his chest, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something flicker inside him. Hope. On the inner lining of the coat, embroidered above the pocket, he saw her name again. E. Winters, RN. He whispered it aloud, tasting the name like a secret prayer. Then, slowly, he stood up. This was not the end. It was the beginning. 1 year earlier. The headlines came in a storm, sharp, unrelenting, scandalous. Tech titan betrayed. Daniel Cross falls from grace. $3 billion vanishes overnight. Silent philanthropist linked to fraud scandal. The world watched in stunned disbelief as one of the most admired minds of modern tech, Daniel Cross, seemingly lost everything overnight. Once a household name gracing Forbes, 30 under 30, and the architect behind the AI-driven healthcare revolution, Daniel had been the invisible force funding emergency wings and pediatric programs in hospitals across the country. Yet, in the blink of an eye, the smiling man in tailored suits disappeared from press conferences, boardrooms, and charity galas. Rumors swirled. Some whispered bankruptcy, others speculated suicide. But the truth was far stranger. Daniel hadn't lost his fortune. He gave it up on purpose. After discovering that his most trusted advisors had embezzled hundreds of millions, shifting funds meant for children's hospitals into offshore accounts, something inside Daniel fractured. He could have fought them publicly, waged a legal war, ruined them. But when he saw how deeply the rot had spread, not just in his company, but in the world around him, he lost faith. Not just in business, but in people. So he vanished. To the public, he was ruined. But behind the curtain, Daniel meticulously orchestrated his disappearance. He liquidated what he could, moved assets to anonymous trusts, and created a paper trail of collapse. Then he walked away from it all, the penthouse overlooking Central Park, the private jet, the driver who knew his coffee order, the gala circuit where kindness came with camera flashes. And he went underground. Literally. For the next 12 months, Daniel Cross wandered city streets wearing clothes he once might have donated. He slept in abandoned buildings, on church steps, under the trembling silence of highway overpasses. He let his beard grow, allowed dirt to take root in his fingernails. The man who once spoke on AI ethics at global conferences now waited in line for soup, watched fights break out over warm socks, and listened to people scream in their sleep. But he wasn't just hiding. He was watching. He wanted to see if kindness, real, raw, unbroadcasted kindness, still existed in the world. If anyone would help a man with nothing to offer in return. He tested strangers. He asked for directions with shaking hands. Dropped to his knees in the snow just to see if anyone would lift him up. Most walked past. Some gave $1 and a warning to get help. A few spared a glance, then looked away faster, as if poverty was contagious. Daniel kept notes in a spiral-bound notebook shoved into his coat lining. He called it proof of grace. But the pages remained painfully empty. With each passing week, he felt himself drifting further into a mental fog, a haze of mistrust, paranoia, and numbness. The nights grew colder, the dreams darker. There were moments, many, when he almost gave up. Until her. It was snowing that night. Daniel sat hunched at the bus stop, soaked through, teeth clattering like dice in a cup. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The wind cut through his hoodie like broken glass. And then, without fanfare, a woman stopped in front of him. Her face was pale with exhaustion, her blue scrubs damp at the cuffs. She looked at him the way no one else had in a year, not with pity, not with disgust, but concern. She took off her parka, placed it on his shoulders, offered coffee, a granola bar. You didn't have to, he whispered. She smiled. I couldn't walk past you. Daniel didn't even ask her name. But he saw it, stitched into the lining of the coat she left behind. E. Winters, RN. And just like that, after a year lost in the shadows, Daniel Cross felt something stir in his chest. Hope. Real. Dangerous. Beautiful. Hope. Emily Winters didn't believe in luck. She believed in resilience. Grit. The kind of endurance that pushed people through dark tunnels with no guarantee of light at the end. For her, there had been no shortcut out of grief, no miracle escapes from hardship. Only long nights, early mornings, and the weight of responsibility on shoulders too young to carry it. By 28, Emily was already a veteran of pain. Not just the pain she'd witnessed in hospital rooms and emergency bays, but her own. The accident had taken both her parents in an instant. A patch of black ice. A semi-truck skidding into the wrong lane. She still remembered the phone call at 2:17 a.m., the silence afterward, and the crushing realization that she was now Max's everything. Her little brother, just 15 at the time, had stood silently at the foot of their apartment stairs when she returned from the morgue. He didn't cry. He just asked, "Are we still a family?" That was 3 years ago. Now Max was 17, with a stubborn streak, a genius-level grasp of computers, and a backpack that never stayed zipped. Emily loved him with the kind of fierce protectiveness that made her take on second shifts, give up weekends, and juggle 2 jobs while pretending she wasn't falling apart inside. Rent was always late. The fridge was always nearly empty. But Max had clean clothes. He had Wi-Fi for his homework. He had Emily, steady and unfailing, even when her eyes sagged from fatigue and her smile trembled from stress. She never let him see her break. That Monday morning began like any other. Emily woke before the sun, brewed cheap coffee, and ironed her blue scrubs while listening to the news through cracked phone speakers. The heating had gone out again. Her breath fogged in the tiny kitchen. "Max," she called. "Breakfast is a banana and a protein bar." "Sorry, it's a budget kind of week." He emerged from his room in a hoodie and headphones, grunting a sleepy "thanks," as he grabbed the food on his way out the door. "I've got robotics club after school," he said, already halfway down the steps. "Love you. Love you more," she replied, and for a moment, she smiled. It was routine, familiar, but fragile. She arrived at the hospital just before 7 a.m., ducking into the staff lounge to clock in. The ER was already buzzing. Flu season was in full swing, and the trauma board was lit up like a Christmas tree. Emily didn't flinch. She pulled her hair into a ponytail, fastened her ID badge, and dove into the chaos. No one worked harder than her. She took the patients no one else wanted, nonverbal, combative, drenched in their own fear. She sat with the dying when families didn't show. She found blankets for the homeless who came in with frostbite. She held hands, wiped brows, stitched wounds, and whispered words of comfort as if they were holy incantations. Her supervisor, Angela Mathers, a no-nonsense woman with steel-gray eyes, often pulled her aside. "You don't have to be a saint, Winners," she'd say. But Emily just shrugged. "If I don't, who will?" What Emily didn't know, what no one knew, was that someone was watching her. He went by the name Ethan Hale now. Clean-shaven, dressed in standard-issue hospital clothes, Daniel Cross sat propped up in room 314 with a leg brace and a chart that said mild concussion after slipping on ice. The staff believed he was just another underinsured construction worker recovering from a fall. He'd forged the ID himself, made a few discreet calls to a doctor friend still loyal to him. Everything was airtight, except his attention. His eyes never left her. He'd come back because of that night at the bus stop. The night when Emily had offered warmth without asking for a name. No judgment, no expectations, just kindness. Real, unfiltered kindness, the kind Daniel hadn't seen in years. He didn't approach her immediately. He needed to know more. Who she was, why she gave without hesitation, whether that moment had been a fluke or a window into something deeper. So he became a ghost in the hospital halls, walking slowly on crutches, listening, watching. What he saw left him stunned. Emily worked harder than anyone he'd ever hired in his own companies. She skipped breaks, traded shifts, comforted strangers. She laughed with terminal patients, cried silently in the supply closet, and once gave her own lunch to a diabetic man who'd missed his insulin dose. "She's a damn machine," a younger nurse whispered one day. "No," said Angela Mathers quietly. "She's a woman with the weight of the world on her back." Daniel needed more. He followed her discreetly one night after her shift. Watched as she walked 6 blocks to a small apartment building with peeling paint and a broken buzzer. He waited until she disappeared inside. Through the cracked blinds, he saw her set down her bag, hug a teenage boy, and start folding laundry. No maids, no staff, no luxury, just life, raw and unfiltered. He returned to his room and pulled out the battered notebook he'd once called proof of grace. For the first time, he began writing again. Her name is Emily. She is nothing, but she gives everything. The next morning, Daniel struck up a conversation with a nurse passing by. "What's her deal?" he asked casually, nodding toward Emily, who was laughing softly with a frightened elderly patient. The nurse smiled. "Emily? She's something else. Lost her folks a few years ago. Raising her kid brother by herself. Works 2 jobs. Half the time, I think she's running on caffeine and stubbornness. But she never complains." Daniel nodded, concealing his reaction. His mind spun. Everything he'd read in philosophy books and business journals about human character. This woman lived it without knowing she was being watched, without asking for anything. By the end of the week, he couldn't stay silent anymore. He waited until she entered room 314 to check his vitals. "Hi," she greeted him warmly. "Ethan, right?" He nodded, sitting up straighter. "I just wanted to say thank you for being so kind." She blinked. "Oh, it's just my job." "No," he said. "It's not." Something about his tone made her pause. She tilted her head. "Have we met before?" Daniel's heart pounded. "She remembers." "Kind of," he said carefully. "We crossed paths one cold night." Recognition sparked in her eyes. "You were at the bus stop," she said, almost whispering. "Oh my God. I didn't recognize you." He smiled. "New clothes, shaved face, warmer hands. Makes a difference." Her hand flew to her mouth. "I didn't know if you were okay. You just disappeared." "I've been watching," he said, then caught himself. "Not in a creepy way, I promise. Just trying to understand why someone like you exists in a world like this." She shook her head, flustered. I'm not special. Yes, he said gently. You are. She looked away, brushing hair from her face. You really had me fooled with the concussion story. He laughed. I needed time to see you as you really are. Silence hung between them. Not awkward, just full. Then Emily asked the question she hadn't realized was inside her. Why? Because, he said, rising slowly to his feet. You saved me. Not with a coat, but with proof. He handed her the notebook, battered, weathered, and full of scribbles. On the first page, he'd written, You were the warmth in a world gone cold. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Daniel touched her shoulder lightly. Let me help you now. She looked at him, this man who'd fallen from grace and risen not with arrogance, but with gratitude. You don't owe me anything, she said. I know, he replied. That's why it matters. The text came just after midnight. Ethan, can you meet me tomorrow after your shift? I promise it's not about vitals. Emily stared at the message for a long time. Her shift had ended hours ago, but she was still wide awake, curled on her couch in blue scrubs, sipping cold tea. Her body ached from 12 hours on her feet, but something about the request sparked her curiosity and a slight unease. Ethan, the quiet patient who'd once sat shivering at a bus stop, had become more than a passing memory. He was now a presence, watching, asking questions. And yet, he never crossed the line, never made her feel unsafe, just intrigued. She replied with a cautious sure. Where? Ethan. Rooftop garden. Hospital. 7 p.m. dress warm. The next day crawled by. Every monitor beeped louder. Every hallway felt longer. Emily found herself checking the clock far more than usual. By 6:58, she was climbing the narrow staircase behind the oncology wing, her badge still clipped to her chest, heart pounding in her ears. The rooftop garden was technically off-limits to most staff, usually reserved for VIP patients and high-profile board members. She'd only been there once during orientation and remembered the panoramic view of the city skyline. But tonight, it looked different. Fairy lights glowed along the railing. Candles flickered on a small table. And there, standing with his back to her, was Ethan, no longer dressed in hospital pajamas. He wore a navy-tailored suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. His hair was neatly styled, and when he turned, his eyes held something new: clarity, confidence, wealth. Emily stopped in her tracks. Ethan, she asked, her voice uncertain. He smiled, and for the first time, it felt like the real one. My name is Daniel, he said gently. Daniel Cross. She blinked. The name tugged at something familiar. A magazine cover, maybe? A news story? Forbes? Her brow furrowed. I'm sorry. What? I wasn't honest with you, he said, stepping forward. I've been living under a false name. I had to. After what happened, Emily crossed her arms, unsure whether to be angry or confused. So you've been lying to everyone? To me. Yes, he admitted. But not to hurt you. To protect myself. And to understand the world I used to control from a very different place. He pulled a folder from the small bench beside him and handed it to her. Inside were documents. Clippings from Forbes, Wall Street Journal, even a hospital board registry. Photos of Daniel with politicians, business leaders, and charity donors. One headline read, Tech billionaire Daniel Cross vanishes after corporate scandal. Another, Cross Enterprises crumbles, CEO betrayed by his inner circle. Emily stared at the pages, flipping them in disbelief. This is real? He nodded. I walked away from all of it. Or maybe I ran. I wanted to see if anyone in the world would help me without knowing my name. And I gave you my coat, she whispered, still reeling. You didn't hesitate, he said. That night, I wasn't a billionaire. I wasn't even a person, really. I was just a shivering mess on a bench. But you saw me. Emily's throat tightened. Daniel continued, voice low and steady. You didn't know who I was. You didn't ask what I could offer. You simply gave. And I needed that more than I realized. You brought me back. She looked up at him, eyes wary. So what now? You've had your experiment. Your proof of kindness. What do you want from me? He smiled again, but this time, there was something hopeful behind it. I want to build something new. Something honest. I've seen how the system treats people like you. The nurses, the aides, the ones who carry entire hospitals on their backs without recognition. I want to start a foundation. One that funds nurses, mental health support, frontline training, family care stipends. A network that empowers the people who've been overlooked for too long. Emily stared, lips parted. I have the capital. I have the connections. But I need a face. A heart. Someone who understands what it's really like down in the trenches. Someone real. He took a step closer. I need you, Emily. Her mind whirled. She was used to fluorescent lights, not fairy lights. Emergency rooms, not rooftop offers. She'd never had time to dream beyond survival. Now this man, this myth, was asking her to step into a world she never imagined. And he was serious. Daniel, she said slowly, I'm just a nurse. I have bills. I have a kid brother I'm raising. I'm nobody. No, he said firmly. You're the reason I'm standing here right now. You're the reason I believe in people again. That's not nobody. That's everything. Silence fell again, soft and sacred. Emily clutched the folder in her hands like it might disappear if she blinked. I don't know if I'm ready for this, she whispered. Then let me help you, he said. Let me carry some of the weight for once. The rooftop was quiet, only the sound of wind brushing through the planters. Far below, the city buzzed unaware. Emily finally nodded, a slow, trembling motion. Okay, she said. Let's build something. Daniel smiled, not the smile of a billionaire with a secret, but of a man finally finding purpose again. And for the first time in a very long time, Emily let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change, too. The first signs of trouble came early in the morning. Emily had just wrapped up a sleepless night shift at the hospital, and as she settled into the comfortable routine of working alongside Daniel, now her partner in the new medical foundation, the storm began to form. It started with a single phone call, a number she didn't recognize. It was from her supervisor, her voice tight with unease. Emily, there's something you need to see. I'm sending it over now. The email arrived minutes later, bearing a link to a news story. The headline was like a slap in the face. Billionaire's nurse girlfriend or gold digger? Who's really behind the foundation? Emily's stomach churned as she clicked the link. The article was a barrage of accusations, none of them true. It painted a picture of her as a manipulative woman who had entangled the reclusive billionaire, Daniel Cross, in a romantic scheme to take advantage of his newfound wealth and guilt over his past. The source was familiar. An ex-associate of Daniel's from his corporate days, someone who'd been angry at being cut out of the new foundation. His claims were exaggerated, twisted. It didn't matter. The damage was done. Headlines spread faster than truth. The media frenzy began. Every outlet picked it up, each one more dramatic than the last. Did Emily Winters really have Daniel Cross in her sights all along? One headline asked. Others questioned her credibility, her intentions, painting her as a nurse who'd suddenly jumped from humble to billionaire in the blink of an eye. Daniel had disappeared. That was his way when things went wrong. He'd retreated into the shadowy world of his mind, the place where the ghosts of his past lingered. The texts from him stopped coming. The calls went unanswered. Emily could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. She wasn't just fighting to protect herself. She was fighting for the dream she and Daniel had built together, a dream that was suddenly crumbling in front of her eyes. That evening, in the dim light of her apartment, she sat on the couch, Max's face a mere blur as he sat beside her, his silence echoing louder than anything he could have said. She held her phone, staring at the relentless stream of hateful comments and pitying glances sent her way. I didn't do this, she whispered aloud, her voice trembling. I didn't ask for any of this. Max, now 16 and more mature than she sometimes realized, watched her closely. He had been quiet for hours, but his voice finally broke the silence. You didn't do this for you, Emily. You did it for all the nurses no one ever thanks. You did it for all the people like us, who fight every day just to survive. Emily looked at him, her heart aching with the weight of his words. He was right. She hadn't asked for fame or attention, but when she had first agreed to help Daniel, she had done it with the purest of intentions. She had done it because she wanted to make a difference. She wanted to stand for those who were overlooked, underappreciated, and exploited. I just wanted to help him, Emily muttered, the tears threatening to spill. But now it feels like I've destroyed everything. Max's gaze softened. No one's blaming you, Emily. Not really. The world will always try to tear down the ones who actually try to do good. Emily wiped away a tear, nodding slowly. Max was right. She had to keep going. She had to fight for the truth, for Daniel, for the nurses and the healthcare workers who still had no voice. She stood up suddenly, her resolve hardening. I'm going to fix this, she said, determination in her voice. "I can't let them win." Max smiled, the boyish charm creeping into his face as he gave her a supportive nod. "I know you will." The next morning, Emily didn't go to work. Instead, she prepared for something bigger than herself, something bigger than the mess her life had become. By noon, she had arranged for a press conference. A simple affair, just a room with a podium and a single microphone, but it would serve as the platform she needed. She didn't know how it would go, but she had to speak, to fight back. As the cameras flashed and reporters murmured, Emily stood at the podium, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath, glancing at the sea of faces before her. She could feel the weight of the accusations hanging in the air. She could feel them judging her already, but she wouldn't let that stop her. "Good afternoon," Emily began, her voice steady but fierce. "I stand here today not as a gold digger, but as a nurse. A woman who has worked tirelessly for years, just like countless others, to help the people in our hospitals. The men and women who put their lives on the line every day to care for the sick, the broken, the forgotten." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I never wanted fame, and I certainly didn't want to be the subject of a media circus. But I can't let the truth be buried in lies. I didn't get involved with Daniel Cross for money or fame. I got involved because he needed help. Because he had given up on humanity, and I couldn't stand by and watch that happen." She glanced at the cameras, meeting each one with the strength she hadn't known she had. "I'm here to tell you that healthcare workers deserve respect. That we don't just work to survive. We work to make the world a better place. And no matter what happens, I will continue to stand for that." The room was silent for a moment. The reporters exchanged looks. But then the questions started coming, each one more probing than the last. Emily answered each one with the same unwavering truth. It wasn't long before the video of the press conference went viral. The media outlets that had once demonized her now found themselves caught between the truth and the public's reaction. And in the end, the world took notice, not of her fall from grace, but of her resilience, her strength. And somewhere in the distance, Daniel watched. And he knew that Emily Winters was more than just a nurse. She was the heart of the movement they had started together. The early morning sun broke through the hospital's windows, casting golden streaks across the newly built community hospital wing. The air inside was charged with the kind of energy that only a dream being realized could produce. It had taken years of hard work, sweat, and, most importantly, sacrifice. But as Emily Winters walked through the gleaming hallways, surrounded by nurses and staff she'd personally fought to recognize, she couldn't help but smile. This was her world now, her movement, and it was no longer just about her. It was about every nurse, every frontline worker who had been forgotten, overlooked, and undervalued for far too long. She paused for a moment in front of the plaque at the entrance to the new hospital wing, her breath catching in her throat. The names of her late parents were etched into the bronze plaque, alongside a dedication that read, "In honor of those who serve with love, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to healing." It wasn't just a tribute to them, it was a tribute to all the unsung heroes who spent their lives giving of themselves to others. Behind her, the buzz of activity in the hospital was palpable. The foundation she and Daniel had built together was finally becoming everything they'd hoped for and more. The donations, which had once been sparse and hesitant, now poured in from all corners. Former critics and naysayers who had once called Emily a gold digger were now publicly apologizing. They had seen the truth in the press conference, and they saw the good she was doing, not just for Daniel, but for the future of healthcare workers everywhere. As Emily walked through the halls, nurses and doctors greeted her, their faces lit with respect and admiration. A sense of peace washed over her. This was her calling, her purpose, and it was one she was proud of. She paused at a nurse's station and smiled at Sarah, one of the foundation's first board members, who had been with her every step of the way. "I still can't believe we're here," Emily said, her voice tinged with awe. "This hospital wing, this is real." Sarah laughed. "You did it, Emily. We did it." The foundations of the new wing. Complete with state-of-the-art medical equipment, patient care rooms designed to make people feel at home, and an area specifically dedicated to mental health services for healthcare workers, stood as a testament to everything Emily had fought for. But as proud as she was, she knew the work wasn't finished. The journey to truly change the system was ongoing. But they had taken the first crucial step. From the corner of the hallway, Daniel stood silently, watching her. His presence had become a background hum, a constant but steady force in her life since their partnership had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful. Gone was the billionaire who had once tried to hide from his own past. Daniel had stepped away from the spotlight, letting Emily take the reins of the foundation and the hospital wing. He was content to be a partner, not a savior. His role had shifted from that of a man trying to redeem himself to someone who was quietly proud of what they had built together. "Do you want to go check on Max?" Daniel asked softly, his voice grounded in its usual calm. Emily turned to him with a gentle smile. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of gratitude and affection. It was hard to believe how far they'd come. Just months ago, she had been a nurse working double shifts, living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to keep everything afloat. And now, here she was, the leader of a medical foundation that was changing the way people saw healthcare workers, and a woman who had found not only a sense of purpose, but also a true partnership in Daniel. Max, now a college student, was walking the halls of the new hospital wing with a sense of awe, his mind still blown by how far his sister had come. He was studying medicine now, a decision that had been inspired in part by the very woman who had given him everything, who had given him a future. The guilt he'd felt when their parents died in that car accident was a heavy burden to carry, but Emily had shouldered it with grace. She had raised him, fought for him, and worked tirelessly to ensure that he never had to carry that burden alone. Emily joined Max in a quiet corner of the wing. He was holding a textbook, but it was clear his mind wasn't on studying. He looked up at her as she approached, his face breaking into a smile. "You did it, Emily," he said, his voice a mixture of awe and admiration. "I can't believe this is all real." Emily shook her head. "I didn't do it alone, Max. You were always with me. You were my strength." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "I know, but you've given me everything. You've given me a chance. I'm going to make you proud." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she looked at him. He had grown into a young man with a quiet resolve, a man who would make a difference just as she had. She had always worried about how he would cope with their parents' death, how he would manage his own grief. But now, as he stood before her, she knew that all the sacrifices she had made had been worth it. "Max," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "you're going to change the world. I know it." He smiled again, but this time there was something more in his eyes. There was a depth of understanding, of gratitude, that words could not capture. He pulled her into a hug, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. Daniel stood in the distance, watching them with a quiet sense of pride. Emily had always been the heart of their movement, the driving force behind everything they had accomplished. But it was clear now that she wasn't just changing the world for herself or for Daniel. She was changing it for every person who felt unseen, every healthcare worker who was never thanked. As they walked toward the hospital's front desk to leave for the day, Emily noticed something sitting on the counter. It was an envelope, neatly folded, with her name written in elegant handwriting. She opened it, reading the letter aloud to herself, her voice barely a whisper. "Dear Emily, you gave me warmth when I was frozen. You gave me hope when I had none. Thank you for saving my life. With gratitude, Sophie." The weight of the letter hit her like a wave. Sophie had been one of the first nurses Emily had helped through the foundation, someone who had struggled with burnout and mental health issues. And now, here she was, writing a letter of thanks for everything Emily had done. Daniel stepped beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You'll never know how many lives you've touched." Emily looked up at him, her heart full. They had done it. Together, they had built something that was bigger than themselves. Something that would continue to grow, to reach new heights, and to inspire others to fight for what they believed in. And as they stood there, reading the letter, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. The foundation, the hospital wing, the future, they were all part of a legacy that would endure far beyond their lifetimes. And it was a legacy that had started with a simple act of kindness. "Thank you, Daniel," Emily said softly, looking up at him with a smile. "For everything." He smiled back, his eyes filled with warmth. "No, Emily. Thank you. You saved all of us." And as they walked out of the hospital, side by side, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. They had built something real, and together, they would continue to build it for years to come.